You're watching the Stories That Scare channel. There is no turning back now.
3 true Hog Eye Moe horror stories. Hey everybody, I'm glad y'all stopped by. Every town has its stories, the kind older folks tell. Then quickly change the subject. Some legends are about haunted houses, others about things hiding in the woods. But throughout parts of the South, there's an old name that still makes people uneasy. Hog Eye Moe. No one agrees on exactly what he is. Some say he was once a man. Others insist he never was. He's said to wander forgotten back roads, abandoned farms, creek beds, and overgrown fields where people rarely go anymore. Those who've claimed to see him all describe the same things. A towering figure, mud-covered overalls, a battered hat pulled low over his face, and one milky white eye that somehow always finds you, even in complete darkness. People say if Hog Eye Moe speaks to you, never answer. If he whistles, never whistle back. And if he asks, "Need a hand?" you keep walking. Tonight, I've gathered 3 encounters with the legend of Hog Eye Moe. Whether these stories are true, I'll let y'all decide. Story 1. Need a hand. I grew up in rural Arkansas. Gravel roads, soybean fields, and enough woods to get lost in for days. One October evening, I was driving home after helping my uncle repair a fence. The sun had already disappeared. My headlights were the only light for miles. About halfway home, I spotted an old pickup truck sitting on the shoulder. Its hood was up. A man stood beside it. He raised one hand, as if asking for help. "Out where I grew up, you stopped. That's just what people did." I pulled over, rolled down my window. "You all right?" The man never looked at me. Instead, he quietly asked, "Need a hand?" I frowned. "I was asking if you needed one." He slowly lifted his head. The brim of his hat hid most of his face, except one pale, cloudy eye, looking directly at me. Then he smiled and whispered, "You're gonna." The man smiled, then quietly whispered, "You're gonna." Every instinct I had screamed, "Drive." Instead, I reached for the door handle. "I've got a tow strap in the bed. I can—" Before I finished, the old pickup disappeared. Not drove away, not rolled downhill. It was simply gone. Only the man remained, standing in the middle of the road. My headlights illuminated him now. He had to be nearly 7 feet tall. His mud-caked overalls hung loosely from his frame. One boot looked newer than the other. His hands were enormous, long, dirty, as though he'd spent years digging through wet earth. He took one slow step toward my truck. Need another step. Closer. Hand? I slammed the truck into reverse. Gravel sprayed everywhere as I backed away. He never chased me. He simply stood there, watching. When I reached the next intersection, I looked back. The road was empty. The next morning, I drove back with my uncle. There wasn't a truck out here. No broken glass, no tire tracks, nothing. When I told him what happened, he didn't laugh. He just quietly asked, "He asked you if you needed a hand?" I nodded. My uncle sighed. "My granddad warned me about him. He never asks because he needs help. He asks because he wants yours." I frowned. "What does that mean?" He pointed toward the ditch. Half buried in the mud was an old wooden grave marker. The lettering had almost disappeared. Almost. I could still make out 2 words. Hog Moe. No first name, no last name, just those 2 words. My uncle grabbed my shoulder, relieving. As we walked back to the truck, I heard someone behind us. Not talking, whistling. A slow, off-key tune. My uncle never turned around. Neither did I. When we got home, he finally spoke. "If you ever hear that whistle again, don't count the footsteps behind you." I asked why. He stared out the window. "Because if you stop hearing them, it means he's standing still. And that's when he's closest." Some legends don't hunt you. They simply wait for you to stop. Let's move on to story number 2. This next encounter happened at an old playground, just after sunset, where one father realized His son wasn't the only child still playing. The older I get, the more I think every legend has rules. Some are written down. Most aren't. The people who survive are usually the ones who accidentally follow them. Let's move on to story number 2. Story 2. One more push. Every evening after work, I'd take my 6-year-old son Caleb to the neighborhood park. He loved the swings. No matter what else was there, he always wanted the swings. One October evening, we stayed a little later than usual. The sun had already dipped below the trees. The park lights hadn't come on yet. Most of the families had already left. By the time Caleb asked for 5 more minutes, we were the only ones there. I sat on a nearby bench, watching him swing, back and forth, back and forth. Then, he suddenly stopped, completely. He was staring toward the tree line. "Daddy? Who's that man?" I looked. At first, I didn't see anyone. Then, a figure stepped out from behind an old oak tree. He was impossibly tall, wearing filthy overalls. A battered hat covered most of his face. He stood perfectly still, watching the playground. I stood up. "Come here, Caleb." Instead, the man spoke. His voice carried across the empty park. Softly. "Need a push?" Caleb smiled. "He wants to help." "No." I walked toward the swing. "Come here, right now." The man took one slow step forward, then another. He never hurried. He didn't have to. He knew we weren't leaving fast enough. I grabbed Caleb's hand as we turned toward the parking lot. The swing behind us began moving again. Slowly. Back and forth. Back and forth. There wasn't any wind. Then another swing started moving. Then another. Until every swing on the playground was swinging, completely on its own. We reached the truck. Caleb looked back. "Dad!" "The man's gone." I looked toward the playground. He was gone. The swings had all stopped, except one. Caleb's. It was still moving. Higher, higher, higher. Then, without anyone sitting in it, the chains suddenly went tight, as though something impossibly heavy had just sat down. I threw the truck into gear. As we pulled away, Caleb quietly asked, "Why didn't you let him push me?" I gripped the steering wheel. "I didn't like him." Caleb frowned. "He wasn't talking to me. He was talking to the empty swing." I felt every hair on my neck stand up. "What do you mean?" "He said, 'Need a push?'" And somebody answered. I looked in the rearview mirror. The playground was already disappearing into the darkness. Standing beside the swings was Hog Eye Moe, his cloudy white eye fixed on our truck. One long arm was stretched forward, as though he were still pushing. Something we couldn't see. Maybe that's why abandoned playgrounds feel so unsettling after dark. Maybe some children never really leave. Our final story begins with a county road, a flat tire, and someone who arrived long before roadside assistance ever could. The strange thing about old legends is they always seem to know exactly when you're alone. Maybe that's why so many encounters happen on empty roads. Let's move on to our final story. Story 3. The Flat Tire. I was driving home through eastern Oklahoma after visiting family. It was nearly midnight. The highway was empty, no traffic, no gas stations, nothing but miles of trees. Then, bang! The truck jerked hard to the right. Flat tire. I eased onto the shoulder, pulled out my flashlight, and climbed out. I'd barely opened the tailgate when I heard someone behind me. "You need a hand?" I spun around. A man stood about 30 yards away. He hadn't been there a second earlier. Nearly 7 feet tall. Mud-covered overalls, a battered hat, one cloudy white eye, reflecting my flashlight. For just a moment, I actually felt relieved. "Yeah, I've got a flat." He slowly nodded. "I know." Then he started walking toward me. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Each step sounded heavy. Crunch, 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 on the gravel shoulder. Something about him felt wrong. He wasn't looking at the tire. He wasn't looking at my truck. He was looking at me. I suddenly remembered every story my grandfather used to tell. Never answer him. Never accept his help. Never let him get close enough to touch you, I quickly said. "I've got it." He kept walking. I insist. I grabbed the spare tire, but my hands were shaking so badly, I dropped it. The flashlight rolled into the ditch. The world went dark. Then I heard it. Not footsteps, breathing. Right beside me. Slow, heavy, like someone smiling. I didn't reach for the flashlight. I didn't look. I just climbed into the truck, locked the doors, and prayed. The engine wouldn't start. Again, nothing. Outside, a slow knock, not on the window, on the truck bed. Thump, 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 like someone testing the metal. Then, silence. A pair of headlights appeared in the distance. A state trooper. As the patrol car pulled in behind me, the truck started immediately. The trooper walked up. Everything all right? I think so. He glanced toward the shoulder. You by yourself? I nodded. He studied me for a second, then quietly asked, You didn't let him help you, did you? Every bit of color drained from my face. You know about him? The trooper didn't answer. Instead, he walked over to the flat tire, bent down, then called me over, pressed into the dirt. Circling my truck were enormous barefoot footprints, only they stopped. Right beside the driver's door, there weren't any leading away. No return tracks, just one final print. As if whatever made them never needed to leave. The trooper looked at me. You were lucky. I swallowed. Lucky? He nodded toward the highway. Most people take the help. No one really knows who Hog Eye Moe is. Some believe he's just another old Southern legend. Others swear they've seen him standing along forgotten roads. Watching, waiting, always asking the same question. Need a hand? If you enjoyed these stories, let me know which encounter unsettled you the most. Was it need a hand? One more push? Or the flat tire? And tell me, if you were stranded on a lonely road and a stranger appeared out of nowhere, would you accept their help? I'd love to read your answers in the comments. Who knows? Your story might inspire a future episode of Stories That Scare. Keep the fires burning. And as always, I'll tell the stories if you'll stay scared.